And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar. And here we go, people. We're going into the last Sunday of the NFL season, I should say, because it's already Friday, December 27th. And got a jam-packed schedule this Sunday because every single game in week 17, I don't know why I had to count. It's the last week of the season. Every single game this week will take place on Sunday, most of them happening at the exact same time with each other. A lot on the line in a lot of these games. Playoff standings. There's one more division left to be locked up in the NFC East. Oh, wait, no, we still have the NFC West, too. Yeah, so there's two divisions left to be locked up. Playoff seeding still up for grabs in most of the NFC. And surprisingly enough, the second top spot in the AFC is still up for grabs. So, a lot's going to be determined throughout Sunday, and there's a lot of things that could be decided by the end of Sunday because Black Monday is this coming Monday for NFL coaches, and that's not a good thing. So, a lot's going to happen over that 48-hour time period from the beginning of Sunday till Monday's end. A lot's going to happen in the NFL, and we're going to try to preview as much of it as we can. So we're going to start with the 1 o'clock Eastern games and then move into the 4 o'clock and then the great Sunday night football game, and then we'll talk a little bit about what Black Monday could hold towards the end of the show. Sound fair? Sound great to me. So let's start off with one of the games at 1 o'clock Eastern. Chicago at Minnesota. You got the 7-8 Chicago Bears, who have lost two straight, going to Minnesota to take on 10-5 Vikings, who are coming off that humiliating loss on Monday Night Football. And what version of these two teams are we gonna see? Because you got this Bears team who literally has nothing to play for. I mean, they're 7-8. They have no playoff standings, and the Vikings are locked into their playoff spot, so the Bears can't even play spoiler in this scenario. So, maybe they can't even, tank for a good draft spot at this point. The Bears literally are in that little no man's land where no matter what they do in this game, it does not matter. For historical context, I guess there's something to play for, because if Matt Nagy wins this game, the Bears head coach, he becomes the first head coach since Lovie Smith of the Bears in the early part of this decade, in that 2010 to 2011 stretch where he finishes back-to-back seasons as a coach that posts a record of 500 or better. So at least the Bears have that to fight for. That's honestly like the only thing I could find where the Bears have something to fight for. That's literally all they got. I want to speak to a moment for the Vikings, because as a result of the Monday Night Football game, the Vikings are currently locked into the 6th spot in the playoffs. They have the 6th wildcard seed. No matter what happens in this game or the rest of Sunday, the Vikings will be that team. They cannot move up nor down. So they literally have nothing to play for. So I would really argue, hey, take the week off, rest your starters, and go into next week where you're going to be playing the 3rd seed in the NFC. Still don't know who that's going to be yet. It's starting to look like it might be New Orleans, and if you have to go to New Orleans and play, that's going to be a tough environment. You really want your guys rested and ready to roll in that game. I'm always of the argument that if you have a chance to rest your guys, you should do it. Because, God forbid they go out there and Stephon Diggs tears his ACL in this game. That's the last possible thing any of us want. But you just want your guys healthy and ready to go in this game, in the playoff game. This game is inconsequential. This game does not matter in the grand standing of things. Now, I have a gut feeling that Mike Zimmer is probably going to play his starters to win this game, especially because of the way the Monday Night Football game went, where that offense was just, I want to say atrociously bad. That was the word that was about to come out of my mouth. But that feels like underselling how bad it truly was. They had 7 first downs the entire night. They racked up, like, what was it, 139 total yards of offense? That is pitiful numbers. And Greg Rosenthal of the Around the NFL podcast correctly pointed out that there was only one other offense this season that put up that bad of numbers in a game, and it was when the Jets had to start Luke Falk at quarterback against the New England Patriots earlier in the season. Yeah, you remember those Luke Falk days for the Jets? It was that bad. That's how bad the Vikings looked on offense. So, if the Vikings are going to start their guys and play their guys on offense, they're going to have to instill some sort of confidence in that offense going into the playoff games. Because God forbid if they go out and lay another bad egg in a home. This is a home game for the Vikings. So if they go out in front of a home crowd, lay another egg right before a playoff game, it could do way worse than a loss, because it could effectively neuter any confidence they have going into that game. Bears are a good defense. Their offense is so-so. We've been over this. And the Vikings defense was good in that Monday Night Football game. I know they let up that big touchdown run late, but they were exhausted and tired because their offense wasn't helping them at all. I do think that Vikings defense is playing really good football right now. And the Vikings they've only lost one game at home all season long. They're 6-1 at home, if I'm doing my math correctly. And I think they should win this game. They should. But once again, we don't know if any of the starters or how many of the starters for the Vikings are going to be playing in this game. I just saw something scroll across a ticker on my TV screen that said Kirk Cousins, the Vikings quarterback, is unsure if he's even playing Sunday. So, I mean, there's a lot we don't know going into this game, but I'm of the opinion that if the Vikings starters do play, and that's what we're going to work with under this assumption, they should win this game. I think we could all agree on that, correct? They should beat the Bears in Minnesota. So I'll take the Vikings to win in Minnesota. And we're moving on to, let's go to the AFC North. You got the 6-9 Browns going to Cincinnati to take on the 1-14 Bengals. So the question for this game is, how low can the Browns sink? Because doesn't it feel like, we've talked about this every week on the recap show, that the Browns just find a new low to sink to every single week, do they not? The Cardinal game. Who did they put? The Ravens game last week. It just feels like every week it's something new with this Browns team just being just wholly dysfunctional. And you know what's even lower than everything the Browns have done this season? Losing to a 1-14 team, the worst team in the NFL by record standards, by far, in the last game of the season, just to give your fan base that kick in the crotch one last time in 2019. Am I right? Here's the thing, though. It's on the road, it's in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati has already locked up the number 1 overall pick in the draft, which is what they want. So even if Cincinnati wins this game, they still get that number 1 draft pick. So Cincinnati can go balls to the wall here and go get a win and not have it hurt them. And just one more time for old time's sake, because we're all expecting them to, at this point in the draft cycle, it is December and the draft isn't till April, so a lot of things could change. But at this point, everybody's under the assumption that the Bengals are going to take quarterback Joe Burrow from LSU. So this could very well be Andy Dalton's last game as a Cincinnati Bengal. So why not? One last time in front of the home crowd? Why not go get a win? Am I right? Why not? If you've watched the Browns games the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't know why you would subject yourself to that kind of torment, like I said, it just feels like they have a new low they sink to every single week. But doesn't it feel like that a lot of those players have just, checked out mentally? Like they're already done. They're over with this season. Like they just don't care anymore. And that's typical of, a team with a losing record, 6-9 going into the final weekend. That's typical. I'm not saying that's a bad thing that they're feeling that way, but doesn't it feel like that? So, in my opinion, that a lot of those Browns players and maybe some of the coaches have checked out a bit. They're going on the road to a 1-win Cincinnati team. This feels ripe for, I want to say ripe for an upset, but is it even an upset if Cincinnati wins this game? Like, that's how bad the Browns have played. That even if Cincinnati wins this game, I don't know if you could call it an upset. That's how bad the Browns have been lately, which is very, very bad. So, I know I really haven't done well at doing this entire year. I think I've only worked once out of like maybe 3 or 4 tries. But I'm calling the upset. I guess if you want to call it an upset. I'm saying Cincinnati wins in Cincinnati, final game of the year, final game for Andy Dalton as a Bengal, and they go out and just put the final nail in the coffin of the 2019 Browns. There you go, 6-10 in the most disappointing season in Cleveland in quite some time. Ooh, what's worse, this season for Cleveland or that season where they didn't win a single game a couple years ago? Which one's worse? Ooh, see? Ooh, that's a tough one. I'll take Cincinnati to win. I just can't trust the Browns. I just can't. I wanted to say the Browns will win this game, but I just can't trust them at this point. They're too bad. And we're moving on. We're moving on to the AFC West. And an interesting one. This one's going to have some playoff implications. Because you got the LA Chargers, who are 5-10, have lost 2 straight, going to Kansas City to take on the 11-4 Chiefs, who have won 5 straight. Now, for this game, no defense in the league has been hotter than the Kansas City Chiefs over the last 5 games. They're averaging giving up 9.6 points per game over their last 5 games. That's incredible. Those are great numbers. Granted, they aren't exactly beating world beaters on offense. You got the Raiders when they were in their slump, the Chargers thrown in there too, that Mexico City game on Monday Night Football. Who else was there? You had the Bears on Sunday Night Football last week. That's just some of the teams. Oh, the Patriots too, when the Patriots are still having offensive issues. Those are just some of the teams that the Chiefs have been beating up on through their defense lately. So, like I said, not world beaters on defense, but those are still some great, great numbers that they're putting up on defense. And you got this, really good Chiefs defense that's playing great right now, going up against the Chargers offense that really hasn't done much these last couple weeks. They can't get anything going even if they tried. So it almost feels straightforward, doesn't it? That's why I'm taking the Chiefs to win. I know I'm kind of burning through this one, but it feels like such a lopsided matchup. I'll take the Chiefs to win it. Yeah, I just have no faith in the Chargers at this point. It's in Arrowhead. It's going to be in the cold, in the outdoors. Phillip Rivers is just throwing hot air balloon footballs these last couple of weeks. It just feels like a slam dunk win for Kansas City. The last time these two teams played, it was in Mexico City on Monday Night Football, like I just mentioned. The Chargers racked up like 300-something total yards in the first half, then didn't do anything in the second half. It came down to the wire. Phillip Rivers throws an interception in the red zone to seal the game. It was close in that game, but it just doesn't feel like it's going to be close at all in this one. And that was really the start of that of the Chiefs' renaissance on defense, wasn't it? It was either that week or the week before with this Chargers team when their defense started playing lights out football. Like I said, I'm going to take the Chiefs to win. Now, I said that there were playoff implications in this one, and there are, because the Chiefs are currently the 3rd seed in the AFC. And they have a chance to move up, but only to the 2nd seed. because Kansas City beat New England earlier in the year, remember? They went to New England, beat New England. So if Kansas City wins this game and New England loses their game, then Kansas City moves into the second seed. So Kansas City has something to play for. But this game is also important to the wild card standings. And here's why. Because Kansas City is sitting there at the third seed. Houston is sitting at the fourth seed. Kansas City's game is at 1 o'clock Eastern. Houston is at 4 o'clock. You know, that 4 o'clock, 4:25 time slot, that area. And Houston is one game behind Kansas City. Houston beat Kansas City earlier in the year, remember? So if they finish the season tied at the same record, Houston would move into the third seed. You're following me here so far? Okay. So if Kansas City loses this game to the Chargers and Houston wins their game later that day, Houston becomes the third seed, correct? But if Kansas City wins this game, it becomes mathematically impossible for the Houston Texans to move up. Ergo, Houston could, in theory, sit their starters in their game, thus deciding the final wild card spot, which we'll get into a little bit later. But a lot of the AFC playoff drama could be decided in this game, if you catch my drift, is what I'm getting at, is what I'm trying to say. So on paper, it looks like this game isn't worth paying much attention to, but in actuality, it could kind of be the linchpin for the rest of the AFC playoff spot, especially that final wild card spot, which is up for grabs right now between, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and Oakland are all vying for it in this final weekend. So this game may look like nothing, but it actually might be something, Like I said, I'll take the Chiefs to win. And one last thing I want to talk about for this one, not about the game. Could this be Phillip Rivers' last game as a Charger? The quarterback? Could it really be time? I don't remember mentioning this on the last show, but I'm starting to get a sinking suspicion that if the Chargers get a good enough draft pick in the first round, they might take Justin Herbert out of Oregon with their first round pick. Now, if the Chargers decide to move on from Phillip Rivers this offseason, I wouldn't blame them. I really wouldn't. It feels like it's time, for him to not move on to a different team, but just maybe retire. He feels like he has massively regressed as a quarterback. Looks like a shell of his former self. And I'm serious. If you haven't watched Phillip Rivers play this year, he is just throwing up hot air balloons every single pass, 50-50 jump balls, more like 30-70 jump balls in favor of the defender. It's become ugly to watch. So I think if you're like a historical football nerd like I am, this could potentially be, Phillip Rivers' last game as a Charger, and I think that's something that's worth watching. Because Phillip Rivers has been their bedrock as quarterback for, what is it now? 13, 14 years? And he's been a pretty dang good one. So I think that's worth keeping an eye on at least. Once again, I think the Chiefs win in kind of a linchpin game of the rest of the AFC. Now, remember when I said that a lot of these games are going to kind of overlap with one another and happen at the same time? Like I said, how Kansas City can move up if New England loses and Kansas City wins. Well, Kansas City won't know the result of the New England game until they get off the field of their game, because the New England game is happening at the exact same time. And that's the game we're going to talk about right now. Miami, the Dolphins, the 4-11 Dolphins, going to New England to take on the 12-3 Patriots, who have won 2 straight. Now, like I said, Kansas City needs to win their game and New England needs to lose in order for Kansas City to become the second seed. And New England has not mathematically locked up the second seed, as you could probably tell. So they still have work to do. You got a Patriots team that's still going to come out there and try. It's in Foxborough. This feels like a recipe for disaster, don't it? If you've been paying attention to this Patriots dynasty over the years, you know that they need one of the top 2 seeds. They do. This team is not built to be, a third or fourth seed, go on the road for most of the playoffs and win, 2 to 3 games on the road outdoors. They're not built for that. They could, but especially now since Tom Brady's much older, their team's really banged up. They need to, be that 2 seed and hopefully at most play 1 game on the road in the playoffs if they make it that far. If they have to go to Baltimore, per se. So they know how desperately they need this 2nd seed to, increase their chances of going deep into the playoffs. And I think this is going to be a very interesting game to watch. It's kind of a litmus test, I would say, for the Patriots. And you're thinking to yourself, they're playing the freaking Dolphins. How is this a litmus test? Follow me on this one. We can all agree that the Patriots offense finally showed some signs of life last week against Buffalo, correct? Especially their pass offense. It was the most we've seen out of them in, months? So I want to see some more of it. I know your passing offense isn't prolific, but this is, arguably one of the worst defenses in the entire league. If I remember correctly, they're 31st, 30th in total defense. They're 32nd in points allowed on defense. This is a terrible, terrible defense. So maybe show me some more on offense if you catch my drift, If you come out and look sluggish and terrible on offense, then start raising some alarm bells again. I'm not saying go out and, rack up 40 points, but show me some competence. Show me more of what you showed me last week, because what you showed me last week wasn't great. It wasn't, oh my gosh, stop the press is good. But it was more than we've seen for the vast majority of the year, and that's what I want to see out of the Patriots going into the playoffs, is some hope, some light that they are still who we thought they were. Because for most of the year, they haven't been who we thought they were. Now, the last time these two teams played, it was week 2. I know that was a very long time ago, but flashed all the way back to then, and it was just a massacre by the Patriots defense in Miami. I mean, they were just murdering folks left and right. A lot of turnovers. It was oh God, what was it? It was like a 40-point blowout or something like that. Just completely one-sided. Now, this Dolphins team is much better than that Dolphins team in week 2. I think we can all agree on that. They're not getting blown out by 40 to 50 points like they were in those first 2 games anymore. They're competent. They're competitive. They're in most of their games. This is a much better Dolphins team. But they're going on the road to Foxborough against a good Patriots defense. I'm sorry, it almost writes itself for this Miami team. I know they're frisky, and Fitzmagic has been a fun little story to talk about, but I'm taking the Patriots to win it. I think the Patriots slam the door shut on the rest of the AFC, lock up that 2nd seed, and that's all they wrote. Patriots really lucked out on this one. Getting this downtrodden Dolphins team coming into their home in the last week of the season. That's the definition of lucky, and that's what the Patriots have been for 20 years. They've been pretty dang lucky. Once again, I'll take the Patriots to win, and we're moving on. So, we're going to talk a lot about this game. You got the 6-9 Atlanta Falcons, who have won 3 straight, going to Tampa Bay to take on the 7-8 Buccaneers. So last night, I'm sitting here, it was right before Eastern Michigan, my college, played in the Quick Lane Bowl. I was typing up my notes really quick. And when I got to this game and how I wanted to talk about it, I have it right here in my notes from last night, Thursday night. On the surface, it looks like neither of these two teams have anything to play for. But once you take a look below the surface, there's actually quite a bit. I actually have that verbatim in my notes. I had some yada, 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 yada about Jameis Winston, which we'll get to here in a second. But I wrote here in my notes, right here, this is exactly what I wrote last night. Falcons head coach Dan Quinn was pegged as a dead man walking going into their bye week with a record of 1-7 this season. What did they do since then? Well, they just went 5-2 coming out of the bye week with wins on the road against New Orleans and San Francisco. Then suddenly, there are whispers that Dan Quinn could potentially keep his job. I wrote that last night, and I was prepared to come in and talk about it. And what happens? I wake up this morning to an announcement from the Atlanta Falcons, from their owner, that Thomas Dimitroff, their general manager, and head coach Dan Quinn will be returning in 2020. So that's cool, I guess. I was prepared to come in and spiel a whole thing for Dan Quinn because I actually like Dan Quinn. Here's the thing: it was one thing when they went on the road to beat New Orleans and Carolina in back-to-back weeks, but it was that San Francisco win that started to change people's opinions. After that game is when I started to notice some talk that maybe Dan Quinn could be staying. You would see it on all the talk shows, all the post-game shows. Every time they would talk about that San Francisco game and they would finish the highlights, one person would turn to another and ask, does this win save Dan Quinn's job? And there was always a pause, a lengthy pause, I would notice, where people would think about it for a couple seconds and then go, no, I don't think this is enough. It's too little too late. And I agreed with them. And then last week happens, and granted, you shouldn't really celebrate massively against a win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but then it started to sound like that momentum for Dan Quinn was picking up a bit, didn't it? Then all of a sudden I hear a couple more people saying, hey, maybe it's not the craziest idea in the world if Dan Quinn keeps his job. And I'm sitting there like, what? I thought we had already decided this man was going to be fired. Now you're telling me there's a chance he could keep his job. And I wanted to come in and say that this game could be, a swaying factor in that because, Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay. They've got a really good offense and all this and that. And if you win the last game of the season, it leaves people with a good impression. It's the last thing they think of, how you ended the season. So it could have gone a long way for Dan Quinn, but now it's already decided that he's going to be returning. So, good for him. Those players haven't quit on Dan Quinn one bit, and that's great for them. Like I said before, I really like Dan Quinn as a coach, and I think if he had gotten fired, he probably would have found a job really quickly with another team. But I do want to say, Atlanta, you probably didn't time this very well because if you remember last week, there was that report that Tampa Bay was ready to, extend Jameis Winston for one more year, and then he came out and threw 4 interceptions. So, maybe this is something you keep under wraps until the end of the season. Because now if Dan Quinn goes out and gets out coached in the final week of the season, then you're sitting there with egg on your face. You know what I'm saying? But, great for Dan Quinn. He gets to keep his job, so that's good for him. But I want to speak to the Buccaneers because I said both teams have a lot to play for, and the Buccaneers have to, like I said a second ago, they are apparently leaning towards giving Jameis Winston a franchise tag this offseason, which means he would be their quarterback for 2020. Now, that report came out before Jameis Winston threw 4 interceptions against the Houston Texans, so maybe they should pump the brakes a bit, They still don't have a definitive answer on if Winston will be their quarterback in 2020. And, maybe, I know it's in Tampa Bay, but maybe beating a streaking Atlanta Falcons team, like I said before, they've gone 5-2 since their bye week. So that's really good for them. Maybe beating this Falcons team would be enough to finally, push the rest of the Tampa Bay organization over on Jameis Winston and giving him either an extension or a franchise tag. But I'm not sure. I'll take Tampa Bay to win in this game. It's in Tampa. I know Atlanta has done really well on the road, especially after the bye week. Like I said, they won in New Orleans. They won at San Francisco. So they could very easily win in Tampa Bay. That is very in the realm of possibility. But this Tampa Bay offense, even without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they're just putting up points left and right. And yeah, Jameis Winston is probably going to throw at least one interception or fumble the ball, but that's what happens when you sign up for the Winston Magic Ride. So maybe Jameis goes full Jameis like he did last week, or maybe he doesn't. Remember, he is still within spitting distance of joining the 30 for 30 club, 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season, which is not a good thing. Once again, I'll take Tampa Bay to win, and we're moving on. Back to the AFC East we go. You got the 6-9 Jets going to Buffalo to take on the 10-5 Bills. So, similarly to how we talked, similarly how we talked about the Vikings earlier, the Bills are in almost the exact same situation as the Vikings were. They're locked into their playoff spot. No matter what the Bills do in this game or what happens in the rest of the AFC on Sunday, the Bills are stuck in their spot as the 5th wild card spot in the AFC playoffs. They cannot move up nor down. So, same question for the Bills that I posed to the Vikings. Why not rest your guys? Give Josh Allen and those running backs and heck, even Josh Brown and Cole Beasley, give them a week off. Have them rested and ready to roll into what we're assuming will be Houston in the 4th seed of the playoffs and wild card weekend. Why not give them a week off? Because look who you're playing. You're playing a Jets defense who has shown signs of being good throughout the season. Look what they did to Pittsburgh last week, for crying out loud. One of the better run defenses over the course of the season, and that should give Bills fans a pause because the Bills like to run the ball. It helps to balance their offense. It takes the pressure off Josh Allen. And since the Jets are good at stopping the run, it would force Josh Allen, if he does play in this game, to force the ball and have it come down on him to win the game, if it comes to that. So if Buffalo is going to win, they'll have to throw the ball a fair amount, is what I'm getting at. It'll be interesting to see if any Bills starters do play or how many. Because, that Bills defense has been good throughout the vast majority of the year. But guys like Tre'Davious White, one of the better secondary guys in the entire league, has the potential to not play in this game. Let's call a spade a spade. You got two solid defenses. I know the Jets hasn't been talked about as much, but it's been a good defense. And some so-so offenses opposing them. It isn't going to be a barn burner by any metric. These two teams played earlier in the season, week 1, if you remember correctly. And it was an odd game because the Jets jumped out to like a double-digit lead in the first half and then didn't score a single point in the second half. Bills came all the way back and stole it in the final minutes with that defense in New York. Well, I know both these teams play in New York, but it was at the Jets, so technically a road game. But this time it's at Buffalo. But we're gonna do the same metric that we used for the Vikings game. So let's just assume all the Bills starters play throughout the game. Who wins this one? I'll take the Bills to win it, assuming that all the Bills starters play in the game. The same way we talked about the Minnesota one. Jets have just been too up and down this entire season, and it just feels like adequate that they would probably go out and rack up like 200 total yards in the final game of the year for the Jets and score 13 points and get beat 24-13. That just feels like what the Jets would do in their final game of the year. Once again, I got the Bills to win in an AFC East showdown, and we're moving back to the NFC North. A game that has some pretty big playoff implications. You got the 12-3 Green Bay Packers, who have won 4 straight, going to Detroit to take on the 3-11-1 Lions, who have lost 8 straight. So, for the Packers, it is simple. You are currently the 2nd seed in the playoffs in the NFC right now. That is where you currently sit at. You win this game, you guarantee you will not finish lower than that. It is that simple for the Packers. Just win the game and let everything else fall into place as it falls into place. You feel? Like I said, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? Nothing should be expected of this Lions team. Nothing. But, it's the last game of the season. It's a home game for the Lions. You got a division rival coming to town who needs this win. They absolutely need this win. And if they lose this game, if the Packers lose this game, it could severely mess up their playoff hopes and throw it all into chaos and disarray. So for the Lions, at least show up like you care. Don't get beat 35-13. That's all I'm saying. Lions, don't get beat 35-13, because that's what this feels like is about to be unleashed in Detroit. Don't do that. Now, I know at this point all the Lions fans are looking forward to the draft because, if I remember correctly, they're sitting at like the 3rd overall pick, which is really, really great. But, just don't no-show this game. That's all I'm arguing here, Detroit. Don't no-show. Speaking of the Packers defense, they played really great on Monday Night Football. It's probably their best performance since what? In all honesty, since what? Like early October? Maybe even September? It's been a while since we've seen that Green Bay defense play that good. Now you're playing against David Blau and Kerryon Johnson and Bo Scarborough. Not exactly, world beaters on offense. So I would really, really like to see another strong performance from that Green Bay defense like they did on Monday Night Football. It would be very encouraging going into the playoffs if they could end the regular season on a high note from their defense and run game. Because that's what they're going to need in the playoffs because, Aaron Rodgers, he's still Aaron Rodgers that can flip a switch, at the drop of a hat. But, it'd be more encouraging if this running game and defense could help carry the weight more. That way Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to throw 4 touchdowns and 350 yards in the divisional round because the rest of the team is no-showing. You know what I'm saying? It would really be helpful. So I'm taking the Packers to win. This feels very easy and straightforward. I'm taking the Packers to win. But here's a thing to keep an eye on. Like I said, if the Packers win this game, they guarantee that they will not finish lower than the 2nd seed. But if things fall the Packers' way throughout the course of the day, the Packers could end up as the number 1 seed in the NFC. Here's how. Packers win this game in Detroit, and then San Francisco loses on Sunday Night Football, then all of a sudden the Packers are the 1 seed in the NFC, have home field advantage, and the road to the Super Bowl has to go through Lambeau Field. And that is literally the last thing anybody in the NFC wants right now. So Packers are going to be scoreboard watching after they get out of this game, and it'll be very interesting to watch. A lot of teams are going to be watching Sunday Night Football to see what happens and if they can move up or down in the playoffs. But I'll take the Packers to win in this one in Detroit. And we're moving on to another game where a team is probably going to be scoreboard watching. Because you got the 12-3 New Orleans Saints, who have won 2 straight, going to Carolina to take on the 5-10 Panthers, who have lost 7 straight. So, here are the Saints right now, who are currently the 3rd seed in the playoffs, and they're going to need a fair amount of help. But first, they just got to focus on beating this bad Panthers team. So, this Saints offense kind of has been firing on all cylinders these last couple weeks. That San Francisco game where they had the shootout. They had that great Monday Night Football game against Indianapolis. And they had a pretty solid offensive performance against Tennessee on the road. So, this offense is clicking on all cylinders. You had Alvin Kamara look pretty solid last week, which felt great for him, I bet. So, I think it's safe to assume that the Saints team is going to come in hot and fire in like they have these last couple weeks. And that's very bad news for a Carolina team that just feels like something goes wrong every single week. It is something new every single week for them. This Carolina team just has a new leak on their team spring up every single week. First, it was just the run defense. Then it became, oh, their defense can't stop anybody. Then last week it became, oh, their special teams has given up 2 punt returns for touchdowns. Didn't those punt returns were both like 70-yard plus punt returns? It's like something new every single week for this Carolina team goes wrong and just shoots them in the foot. So what is it going to be this week? Are they going to give up like 3 kick returns for touchdowns? Like what's it going to be? Uh, it's just something new every single week. I swear. And then there's, their offense for Carolina. They had rookie Will Grier start last week. He threw 3 interceptions. Couldn't really move the ball all that well. So he's going to have to show a little bit more this week. Or else he is at risk to becoming a career backup, maybe even behind Kyle Allen, which is not a good thing. So Will Grier is going to have to show something a little bit in the final game of the season for the Carolina Panthers offense. So here's the deal. I'm taking the Saints to win. This should be a straightforward win for them. Just run the ball a bunch of Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, and you should be right as rain because Carolina couldn't stop a run game even if it was a 3-legged blind cat running with the football. They couldn't stop that. That's how bad they are. So here's the deal for the Saints. Like I said, they're the 3rd seed in the playoffs, correct? So, Saints, win your game, and either Green Bay or San Francisco loses their games, either one of those happen, then New Orleans becomes the 2nd seed in the playoffs. Either Green Bay or San Francisco loses. Or, if New Orleans wins this game, and both Green Bay and San Francisco lose, if both of those things happen, then New Orleans has the number 1 seed and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. I know, it's a lot. You need a flow chart, I swear. It's a lot of ifs, ands, ors going on at the same time. So, New Orleans, win this game, go home, and scoreboard watch. It's simple as that. That's all they need to focus on. So once again, I'm taking the Saints to win. One last quick note about this game, though, because it's come out this morning, Friday morning. That's when we're recording this. That Antonio Brown, former Pats and Steelers wide receiver, is visiting the Saints today, is working out with them. And if you follow Brown's Twitter feed, you can just see him posting photos and talking about his process throughout the day while he's there. So it's something to keep an eye on because, Antonio Brown's a bit of a troublemaker, in case you haven't noticed. Kind of can't just stop for the sake of stopping. It's already been let known that if the Saints sign him, the NFL would put Antonio Brown on the commissioner's exempt list because they are still investigating the allegations of sexual assault by Antonio Brown. So even if the Saints sign him today, he cannot play for them until the investigation is done. And the NFL tends to take a lot of time on these investigations. So it's something worth keeping an eye on just in case the Saints, sign him by the end of today, Friday, or by Monday. Who knows what they're doing. Or maybe they're just keeping him off the market in case another team tries to sign him that New Orleans could play in the playoffs. So it's something worth keeping an eye on at least. And just wanted to at least mention it because it is something that's happening this Friday morning. So, all the games we just talked about are all happening at 1 o'clock Eastern at the same exact time. So that Green Bay New Orleans thing, how they need, how New Orleans may need Green Bay to lose and New Orleans win, that sort of thing, that's all happening at the same exact time. All the next couple of games that we're about to talk about are happening at 4 o'clock Eastern, and they all impact each other greatly. So why not start with this one? You got the 5-9-1 Arizona Cardinals going to Los Angeles to take on the 8-7 Rams. So the story of going into this one is going to be the health of Kyler Murray. As we talked about on Tuesday's show, he left last week's game against Seattle with a hamstring injury. And it sounds like he's going to try and play in this one. So how healthy will he be? How will that affect him? Because as we talked about before, I think Kyler Murray is at his most dangerous when he is running. He is an absolute threat, and he is the fastest guy on the field without a doubt. So if he can't run, how will that offense look? We could potentially see a heavy dose of Kenyon Drake, the Cardinals running back, who has been white nucleic hot these last 2 weeks, who has been running over everybody and their great grandmother at the same exact time. It has just not been fair if you're trying to tackle Kenyon Drake. So that's what the Cardinals got going on. What about the Rams? I think the Rams offense played really well last week against the 49ers. It's just they let up a maddening defensive play at the end with Jalen Ramsey and Taylor Rapp. Some confusion between those two. And that effectively ended any hope the Rams had at the playoffs. So now here are the Rams. They literally have nothing to play for. They have no first-round picks, so they can't even tank. They have no playoff hopes. So how will they look is what I'm trying to say. Are they going to feel and come out disheartened and, sluggish and just not feeling it? How is this Rams team going to look? Because, they had their heart ripped out by San Francisco. And like I said, they literally have nothing to play for. For the Cardinals, though, I think the Cardinals are sitting in great position in the draft. If I remember correctly, if the season ends right now, the Cardinals have a top 10 pick in the draft, so that's something. Could go get a star defensive player to bolster that defense, or a stud offensive lineman to protect Kyler Murray for the next 5 to 10 years. So maybe if you're the Cardinals, maybe not try your best. You know what I'm saying? Help secure a top 10 draft pick to help your team and Kyler Murray build. I'm just saying it's worth thinking about. You got to look at the big picture, not just a meaningless win in Week 17. Look at the big picture. How can you help this team? And maybe how you help this team is not playing your best in Week 17 and getting like the 8th overall pick in the draft. I'm just saying it's worth thinking about. Since it's in Los Angeles, I'll take the Rams to win. Remember, it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago when these two teams played in Arizona, and the Rams just mollywopped the Cardinals, completely one-sided, shut down that offense. So I don't think it'll be a massive blowout, but I'll take the Rams to win. I think they win comfortably. And we're moving on to a game in the AFC South. You got the 7-8 Colts going to Jacksonville to take on the 5-10 Jags. So this is kind of like the Atlanta and Tampa Bay game. You're thinking, these two teams have nothing to play for. What are we going to talk about here? Well, in actuality, this game kind of impacts the playoffs. This game is important for that last AFC wildcard spot. The Colts must win this game in order to keep the very slim hopes for the Raiders alive. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but it's true. Colts need to win this game to help out the Raiders. Now, we'll get into how the Raiders make the playoff spot, the last wildcard spot here in a minute. But it's just a very odd thing that the Raiders need the Colts to win. So speaking of what the Colts did last week, they had a really perfect day on special teams, the 2 punt returns that we talked about. We probably won't see that kind of outing from them again, but I am thinking that we could see another solid rushing attack from them again this week. They had over 200 rushing yards last week. Maybe not that high, but this Jaguars defense has just been so, at best, average throughout the year that, maybe the Colts with Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines, and Jacoby Brissett, who can run the football, all just combine and just overwhelm that Jags defense. The Jags offense has been stagnant for months, it feels like, so I'm literally expecting nothing from them. But the Jags are kind of going into an offseason of uncertainty. What are they going to do at quarterback? Are they going to roll Nick Foles back out? Are they going to ride the Gardner Minshew Express? Or are they going to go with option number 3, which is the unknown? I think an even bigger question is, will Doug Marrone, the Jaguars head coach, be there in 2020? I think he's a guy to be watching on Black Monday to potentially be let go. So a win in the last game of the season in front of a hometown crowd could maybe help sway things in his favor to give him one more year, one more crack at it. Who knows? And the same thing could be said for the Colts, that they're going into a bit of an off-season of uncertainty because, maybe they finish the season 8-8. Okay, let's say they do. They help keep somewhat afloat without Andrew Luck. But is anybody really confident in saying Jacoby Brissett will be the Colts starting quarterback in 2020? I think it's a fair question to at least work out some other guys and maybe bring in somebody else. I think that's at least fair. But in Jacksonville, the Jags have just been bad for weeks and months, with the exception of that one Raiders game. I'm going to take the Colts to win it. It's just not a good situation in Jacksonville right now. It's just all falling apart. It's hard to believe that, 2 years ago, the Jags were like the cream of the crop in the AFC and were like media darlings and everybody loved them and they were so great. It's hard to believe that was so long ago now. Once again, I'll take the Colts to win to keep the slim playoff hopes for the Raiders alive. And you know what? Let's talk about the Raiders. You got the 7-8 Raiders going to Denver to take on the 6-9 Broncos. First and foremost, the Raiders have to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. You got a pencil ready because you're going to need it for this one. For the Raiders, here's how they make that final wild card spot. They win this game versus Denver. Then Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and Jacksonville all lose. That means Tennessee loses to Houston, Pittsburgh loses to Baltimore, Jacksonville loses to the Colts. It creates a four-way tie in the AFC final playoff spot, and Oakland somehow makes it in on that. That, as that was explained to me, is the only mathematical way the Oakland Raiders make the playoffs. If basically every other team just craps the bed. It's the only way. So here are those Raiders that we just talked about. They have just been so up and down, mostly down, for the better part of a month plus in the NFL. But they had that really nice game on the road last week. So who knows? Who knows what the Raiders are? I feel like you can't trust them, in my honest opinion. They were coming into what was it, like the second half of November as a team that had a really great chance of being a wild card team and even making a run in their division, and they just completely no-showed a couple games, in games that they needed to win. So you're telling me this is a game they need to win and you're just going to trust that they come out and play well? I can't. Especially since this one is also on the road, and as we've talked about a couple times these last couple weeks, the Raiders are just not as good of a team on the road as they are at home. Now they got to go to Denver. It's mile high. It's in the cold. It's outdoors. I can easily see the Raiders coming up short in this one. Speaking to the Broncos real quick. Drew Lock, the Broncos quarterback. Maybe the Broncos have finally hit pay dirt in what feels like an endless search for a quarterback. The last time they had a quarterback they felt confident in was Peyton Manning. Think about that for a minute. They've gone, 4 to 5 years in just this quarterback purgatory where they're having 2 to 3 guys, different guys, every single year play quarterback for them. And maybe, just maybe, they finally found one. Now, it is way too early to tell on this front. It is. He's gone, 3-1 since he became the starter. But the early returns have been very, very promising. And to be honest, I'm starting to like this Drew Lock kid. I really am. Wasn't high up on him when he came out in the draft, but now I'm really starting to like him. In the final game of the year, if he can go out, maybe either go shot for shot with Derek Carr or even outduel him and slam the door shut on the Raiders' playoff hopes, that sounds like a massive plus to me if Drew Lock is going to be the starting quarterback, Hang that mantle on your wall, You know what? I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna say the Broncos win this one. I say the Broncos win this one and effectively slam the door shut on any hopes the Raiders had of postseason football. Be a very interesting game to watch to see how the Raiders come out, how they perform. If they're flat throughout the game or just flat in the second half like they've been for most of the year. And here's a bonus one for you. Do you think Derek Carr will be the quarterback of the Raiders when they move to Vegas next year, when they become the Las Vegas Raiders? I think it's a fair question. I'm not saying it because of how Derek Carr has played this year. I think he's played okay. I think he's warranted another year coming back. I have long held the opinion that ever since John Gruden became the head coach of the Raiders, that Derek Carr was not going to last with him. John Gruden is a very flippy kind of guy who has been known to fall in love with a young quarterback at the drop of a hat. So it absolutely seems plausible to me that in this upcoming draft cycle, John Gruden could see some, young quarterback from, I don't know, Virginia Tech. See, look, I just pulled a random name out of the hat. That's how random John Gruden is. He could pull a name out of a hat, fall in love with that quarterback, and then just ditch Derek Carr. He's done it countless times before to many other players. I just think it's worth keeping an eye on this offseason if Derek Carr is still going to be the starting quarterback for the Oakland Raiders. Not Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders. We need to get used to that. Las Vegas Raiders now. But once again, I'll take the Broncos to win. And we're staying in the AFC, but we're going to the AFC North. As you got the 8-7 Pittsburgh Steelers, who have lost 2 straight, going to Baltimore to take on the 13-2 Ravens, who have won a franchise record 11 straight games. So, as we talked about on Tuesday's show, Baltimore already announced that most of their starters will not play in this game. So guys like Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, Earl Thomas will not be suiting up. So that means Robert Griffin III, the former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in college, former second overall, was he the second overall pick? Yeah, the second overall pick for Washington a couple of years ago, will be getting a full start for the Ravens and will be helming their offense for the entire game. So the question is simple. Can the Pittsburgh Steelers find a way to beat the backups for the Baltimore Ravens? Their playoff hopes depend on it. Steelers are going to be very banged up. I'm assuming no James Conner in this game. Marquise Pouncey, their center, is hurt. No Mason Rudolph, like we mentioned on Tuesday's show. Steelers are coming into this one banged up as all get out. And and Devlin Duck Hodges' confidence has been shot straight to hell after their last game. So the Steelers are coming in probably in their worst shape since, week 2 when Big Ben got hurt. It is that bad in Pittsburgh right now. For the Steelers, it's simple. They have to win this game, and Tennessee needs to lose to Houston. That's the only way Pittsburgh makes the playoffs. They have to win. Tennessee has to lose. Because Pittsburgh has lost their mathematical advantage because they've lost the last 2 games. So they've done it to themselves and now have to find a way to dig themselves out of this hole. Now, if you've never witnessed a Ravens-Steelers game, these 2 teams absolutely hate each other. It is like some kind of weird, ancient blood feud these 2 teams have against each other. They are going out there to absolutely annihilate each other. Now, you're looking at it and seeing, the Ravens' backups are playing, so what's really the point? Don't be put off just by that. I'm telling you, that hatred runs deep. And even the Ravens' backups are frothing at the mouth at the idea that they get to end the Pittsburgh Steelers season in Baltimore and just crush playoff hopes and smash them to smithereens. There are Ravens players that I guarantee are genuinely excited about that. So don't be put off just because they're backups. Because what the Steelers are rolling out on offense is basically a bunch of backups as well. It's going to be a very close, it's going to be ugly, it's going to be tight, very low scoring game, just like the first one in Pittsburgh earlier this season. And you know what? I'm going to take the backups to win this one. Give me the Ravens. I'm taking Baltimore to win this game in Baltimore and effectively end the Steelers' playoff hopes. Give me the Ravens. Give me the Ravens. I just... It feels like the Steelers' offense has regressed so much. I mean, it was bad, for most of the year, but now it just feels like just unwatchable bad. It's sunk so low. So once again, I'll take the Ravens to win, and we're moving on to a very massive game at the 4 o'clock Eastern slot. You got the Tennessee Titans at 8-7, who have lost 2 straight, going to Houston to take on the 10-5 Texans, who have won 2 straight. Now, this entire week, Houston Texans head coach Bill O'Brien has been saying they're going to play their guys, which means they're going to start their starters, all this and that. I'm really getting a gut feeling that they aren't going to do that. That, like I said before, the Kansas City game's going on at 1 o'clock, and that's the only chance Houston has of moving up. And this game's at 4 o'clock. So before this game starts, Houston will know whether they can mathematically move up or not. And if they can't, then I think Bill O'Brien's probably going to at least rest his starters for a good portion of the game. Maybe not all of it, but maybe the Houston starters play one half of football to keep them fresh, and they don't play in the second half. I'm of the opinion that I'm of the camp that, if you have a chance to rest your starters, because God forbid that, DeAndre Hopkins or Deshaun Watson jacks up their hamstring and can't play next week when Buffalo comes to town. That's the last thing Houston wants. So if you got a chance to rest your starters, rest them. But if you got a chance to move up, I guess play for it. I don't know what Houston's going to do. I really don't. Bill O'Brien's kind of an enigma, man. So for the Titans, here you are. Your eternal quest for 9-7 is seemingly coinciding with winning and getting into the playoffs. The Titans have gone 9-7 for 3 straight years and have a chance to do it for the 4th straight year. It is a magical time. For the Titans, it's simple. Win this game, and you are the last playoff team. The Titans basically have the easiest scenario out of every AFC team this Sunday. Just win, and you're in, baby. It is that simple. And to be honest, out of all the possible scenarios, Titans are the most fun. I mean, look at the other teams that are vying for a playoff spot. The Steelers. I mean, if you like really good defense, I can understand that argument. That, hey, Steelers are fun on defense. I get that. I really do. But the Raiders, are they fun? No. You know who's fun? This high-flying Tennessee Titans team. And if they make the playoffs, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to be matched up with the Kansas City Chiefs. And heck yeah, I want to see that rematch of the shootout they had earlier this season. Give me the Titans, man. This team is fun. So the big question is going to be whether Houston plays their guys or not. But the good news for Tennessee is they're going to be trying throughout the majority of the game. Tennessee sat Derrick Henry last week to make sure he was healthy and good to go. And he's going to be back this week. So now you have a healthy, rested Henry who is going to be unleashed on the Houston Texans defense. All signs feel like they're pointing to a Tennessee Titans win, and that's what I'm going to do. I think the Titans go 9-7 for the 4th straight year, and they get that final playoff spot, and the Tennessee Titans cruise to a victory in Houston. I'm going to be honest, even if Houston was playing their starters, I think I would still take Tennessee. I really do. I'm really high up on them. And we're moving on to the first of a double dose of the NFC East. You got the 3-12 Washington football team, who's lost 3 straight, going to Dallas to take on the 7-8 Cowboys. So, this terrible Cowboys team is somehow still alive in the NFC East. Here's the scenario for Dallas. They need to beat Washington, and Philadelphia needs to lose their game that is happening at the exact same time to the Giants, which, in theory, isn't a long shot. It's actually very possible that those two things could happen, and Dallas would sneak into the playoffs at 8-8. That's how Dallas would make the playoffs. Now, speaking to the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, their quarterback, is still hurt. He was not a full participant in practice this week, and if you watched that Philadelphia game, you could tell that shoulder was still heavily bothering him. He's having issues in practice this week, so how will he look in this game? I'm really thinking that he just needs to, take a couple weeks off and just heal. That's what he really needs. And it'll just be interesting to see how that Cowboys offense looks. They were dropping balls last week. Dak was overthrowing people. Nothing could get going. Nothing looked right. Everything was awful, and I hated the world. And we are probably going to see more of it this week. Speaking of the Washington football team, they're having quarterback issues of their own. As we talked about on Tuesday's show, it's already been announced that Dwayne Haskins, their rookie franchise starter, will not be playing in this game because of his hurt ankle, which means Case Keenum, who started the year as a quarterback as their starter and was the starter when they played Dallas in Week 2, will once again get another crack at Dallas in the final game of the year. It'll be interesting to see how the Washington offense looks, how they move the ball, all this and that. Now, I'm going to say this without the slightest bit of irony and without the slightest bit of malice or ill intent. It would be the most on-brand thing of the past 10 years of the Dallas Cowboys if they go into this game absolutely needing to win to keep very slim hopes alive and lose at home to a 3-win Washington team starting their backup quarterback. It would be the most on-brand thing possible for the Cowboys. It really would be. It would just be a giant symbol of what this past 10 years under Jason Garrett has been. Just wasted potential and a mediocre, underachieving, at best, middle-of-the-road team. That's just who they are. I'm taking the Cowboys to win, but I sincerely would not be stunned if Washington won this game, like 24-21, because the Cowboys just look hollow. I really wouldn't be stunned. And we're moving on to the other part of our double dip of the NFC East. You got the 8-7 Eagles, who have won 3 straight and are sitting in the driver's seat of the NFC East, going to New York to take on the 4-11 Giants, who have won 2 straight. For Philadelphia, it is simple. It is simple as this. Win this game, you are NFC East champions. It is that simple for Philadelphia. But there's a problem with that. That is easier said than done, because the last 2 weeks, this Giants offense has entered juggernaut territory, averaging 38.5 points per game the last 2 weeks. Oh, sweet baby Jesus, that's a lot. And Daniel Jones, the Giants quarterback, is coming off the best game of his young career easily. And guess what? That Philadelphia secondary is vulnerable. And they were vulnerable last week against Dallas. The Cowboys just weren't taking advantage of it. So this could potentially be dangerous for the Eagles. You got a team that's kind of flying high and feeling confident on offense, and you got to go to their house in the last game of the season, and they know you need this game. Oh, it just feels like NFC East tomfoolery is afoot. And, speaking of the Eagles, they've also come off some good games on offense as well. Philadelphia has now strung together 2 straight games where they've racked up over 400 yards of offense. That's pretty good, and that's got some confidence for them because, their offense has been slow and sluggish, and they feel like they've kind of turned a corner a bit, and they're feeling a bit better about themselves. And this Giants defense is also terrible. So are we going to see fireworks? Leave us with a good final image of the NFC East. Give us like a 35-40 final. Or go out with a bang NFC East after tormenting us all year. The Eagles' run defense has been great all year long, and we've talked about that to death, and that could potentially shut down Saquon Barkley. So that means Daniel Jones might have to rely, guys like Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate to help move the football. So it'll be interesting to watch. It'll be a dogfight, and it's going to come down to the wire in this one. This game could easily go in favor of the Giants. The Giants have been playing that well the last 2 weeks. And remember, 3 weeks ago on Monday Night Football, the Giants took the Eagles to overtime. It came down to, late drive by the Eagles to win that game, and that's how the Eagles started this win streak. But it just feels like the Giants are a far cry from what that team was. I'm going to take the Eagles to win, but I need to preface this by saying I truly would not be stunned if the Giants won this game. I would very much understand why. And I've been of that opinion for the better part of a week. Ever since I saw this game on the schedule after last week's game, I said, oh, the Giants could easily win this game. That was my initial gut thought. The Giants could easily win this game. I'm going to take the Eagles to win it to finally put to bed this NFC East dumpster fire, but it's worth keeping an eye on. Once again, I'll take the Eagles to win and win the NFC East, and we're moving on to Sunday Night Football. This is it, people. The last regular season game. The NFL regular season schedule consists of 256 games every single year. And this is our game 256. And it is quite the doozy. You got the 12-3 San Francisco 49ers going to Seattle to take on the 11-4 Seattle Seahawks. Everything is on the line. Seattle was hurting earlier this week, and we talked about it on Tuesday's show. They had no running backs. Dwayne Brown is going to be out for a couple weeks. But they got reinforcements. Marshawn Lynch, Robert Turbin, both signed for Seattle, throwing it all the way back to 2012, 2011 for the Seahawks. And if you're expecting their running game to just kind of shrivel up this week, I think you're wrong on that department. I think Marshawn Lynch and Turbin are going to be in great shape. And they're going to at least try to act like nothing is wrong and run it like it normally goes. Turbin and Lynch are bruiser running backs, just like Chris Carson, so I don't think it'll hurt Seattle too much to be missing him. So it'll be... what I'm saying is don't expect Turbin and Lynch to be slouches. These guys weren't just sitting at home on their couches doing nothing before they came back in and signed with the team, is what I'm arguing. They'll come out and try to run their offense as normally as they can. Now, for the 49ers, they may have stumbled here and there. They may have had that terrible loss to Atlanta. But they're right there. They just got this one game, and the prize that they've been after all season long is literally within inches of being grabbed by the 49ers. It is quite simple. Here's the situation for the 49ers. You ready for this? You win this game, you are NFC West champions. And you clinch the first overall seed in the playoffs. It is that simple for San Francisco. Win, and you are the 1 seed. It is basically an all-or-nothing gamble for San Francisco. Win and you get it all, lose, and you're playing on Wild Card Sunday, having to go to whoever the NFC East spits out. For Seattle, this is your scenarios. You got a couple of them. Because you can end up in a multitude of places by the result of this game. If Seattle wins this game, you are NFC West champions. And you could, in theory, end up as high as the number 1 seed. Anywhere from 1 to 3, Seattle could end up. If Seattle wins this game, and both Green Bay and New Orleans lose, Seattle's the 1 seed. If Seattle wins this game and either Green Bay or New Orleans lose, Seattle could end up as the 2 seed. If Seattle wins this game and both Green Bay and New Orleans win, then Seattle would end up as the 3rd seed. You get what I'm saying? And if Seattle loses this game, they end up as the 5th wild card team at the 5th spot and would have to play the winner of the NFC East on wild card weekend. So those are the scenarios for Seattle. I know it was a lot really quick, but that's what they're dealing with. Just win. Just win, Seattle, and figure everything else out later. And like I said before, Green Bay and New Orleans are going to be watching this game intently because it could determine whether Green Bay or New Orleans could get a 1 seed or a 2 seed, that kind of thing. So a lot of teams in the NFC are going to be watching this game, and a lot of people are going to be watching this game because the last time these two teams played, it was on Monday Night Football about a month ago, and it was a classic. It was a great game in San Francisco. Came down to overtime where the Seahawks took it. I'm expecting it to be a close game, come down to the wire. Another close, tight one on Sunday Night Football, and I'm taking the 49ers to win it. I just think the injuries are a bit too much to overcome for Seattle right now. I felt like that loss to the Cardinals was a bit of a blow to their confidence, especially with those injuries. I'm taking the 49ers to win, clinch the NFC West, get that number 1 overall seed, and force the rest of the NFC to come through Santa Clara if they want to go to the Super Bowl this postseason. So, that's it for the preview portion. We just previewed all 16 games that will be going on Sunday. Now, like I said earlier in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about Black Monday here at the end. If you're unfamiliar with the NFL schedule, Black Monday isn't an official day on the NFL calendar. It's just the Monday after the end of the regular season, so this coming Monday. And it's usually the day that most teams fire their head coaches or make head coaching changes or even secondary coaching changes to, go ahead and get a jump start on the coaching search. We never want to, pull for somebody to get fired or lose their jobs because that's really what this is. These are still actual people and they are losing their jobs, and that is never, ever a good thing, and that's always something hard to deal with. And I think the average every year, these last couple of years, has been, like 6 to 7 coaches are getting fired every year. And I had a list. I had like 3 teams to keep an eye on this coming Black Monday to see if they would make head coaching changes. One of them was Jacksonville, like we mentioned with Doug Marrone. I had Atlanta on this list. Like I said, I wrote this last night at, like 8 o'clock right before the Quick Lane college football game. And the other, hoping and praying, Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys. So I wanted to at least talk about, at least 2 to 3 teams that could, in theory, fire their head coaches on Monday. I guess it now falls to maybe Dallas if Jerry Jones is willing to, go ahead and make a change that quickly. I have a feeling they're probably going to drag it out. And Jacksonville, I think Jacksonville's one to keep an eye on. I thought Atlanta was, the obvious one, but I guess I was wrong because Dan Quinn's going to be back next year. So the next time we talk will be Tuesday, where we will recap every single one of these games, kind of set the slate for each team going into the offseason. We'll also talk about the playoffs a little bit, and we'll talk about any and all firings that happen on Black Monday. So it's going to be a supersized show on Tuesday, the first Tuesday at the end of the regular season. So thanks for stopping by this Week 17 preview show, and I'll talk to you Tuesday. Bye.